Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
Are you tired? In pain? Gaining weight? Experiencing any unusual symptoms at all? Welcome to what seems to be this summer's newest from the wellness industry.
These are my top 3 tips for reducing hormonal imbalances.
Learn the best hormone balancing tip. This is the one that I give to all of my clients.
There are 3 vitamins that I love that support hormone balance.
If you have these symptoms, you might have a hormonal imbalance.
Have no fear. Turn to TikTok to cure this in 1 or 2 or 7 or 12 or whatever steps. You will also probably have to buy some stuff. But hey, you'll feel better. Or not. Okay. It's easy to mock. Unless you're actually in pain. Doctors aren't taking you seriously, or you simply can't access a doctor at all. Unless you've tried everything, and nothing seems to work. This is the crux of the hormone imbalance craze. On the surface, yeah, it's another grift, but people really are suffering. Your system is either unavailable to you or dismissive of you. You get desperate, which is what leads you to TikTok, where some people are at least listening to you and sharing your journey. And yeah, some of them are trying to make some money from you too. But then, doesn't of the healthcare system too? I'm Jordan Heath Rawlings. This is The Big Story. Alex Sujong Laughlin is a co-owner of Defector Media and a co-creator of the podcast Normal Gossip. Hi, Alex.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. I'm going to start by asking you about the term itself that we're going to be discussing today. What exactly is a hormone imbalance? When that term gets thrown around, what are people referring to?
So I think there is a medical definition, and then there's a more colloquial use of the term. And so a hormone imbalance, our bodies have more than 50 hormones, and they govern everything from our metabolism to our sex drive, things like that. And they do exist. Different health issues or environmental factors can throw off the balance of your hormones. For example, I have low testosterone because I am on a birth control that affects my hormones, right?
Right.
That is not the kind of hormone imbalance that I'm talking about in this column. A more loosely scientific type of definition that I've been seeing floating around on TikTok specifically among cis women who have anxiety about their health. It's this fear that because of stress, because of the way that they're living, the types of workouts they're doing, the types of work they're doing, that they are messing up their hormones in a way that is having a negative effect on their health and on how they look. And cortisol is particularly the hormone that's at the center of this anxiety. So
why has this become like the de facto problem, which I'll use air quotes around because, again, I'm not sure we're talking all the time here about actual medical problems, but the problem that these women are trying to fix?
I think that a lot of misinformation on the internet, and especially health misinformation, there is a kernel of truth around which, this pearl of misinformation has been formed. And so, when you have excessively high cortisol, your body to burn fat, you might swell up in the face, you might struggle to sleep, your digestion might be off. These are all true things. But I think that the reason this is really picking up is in part because women and marginalized people of all often struggle to have their health concerns met with the appropriate amount of concern and care and attention from healthcare providers.
Right. And so what symptoms are we talking about here, that can be fixed if you just balance your hormones, particularly cortisol?
in like the range of symptoms that can be attributed to high cortisol, according to random people on the internet, is like endless. It's, I'm in a bad mood. I have a stomach ache after I eat. I'm constipated. I don't like the way my face looks. I'm struggling to lose weight. Like, all of these things are allegedly attributable to high cortisol. And the thing is, like, for me, I'm somebody who, I have my own health anxieties, and that's reflected in my TikTok algorithm. So when I scroll on TikTok, I often get these videos of people saying, hey, do you have all of these symptoms? And then they'll list off all the symptoms that I have that I'm feeling concerned about. And they'll say, it might be because you have high cortisol. Try this supplement and it might help you.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned your own health journey here, because that's written about in respect to this. How did you, again, as somebody who is an analyst of this kind of corner of the wellness industry, somebody who's already identified this at least partially as misinformation, how does this work on you?
Oh my gosh. I mean, part of why I wrote this was because it worked on me. I bought a magnesium powder off of TikTok and drank it every night. And I was like, I don't think I'm feeling any better, but I'm also not feeling any worse. So it can't hurt, I guess.
Heather, can you describe it for people who haven't seen it or heard of it, or might be wondering now if it's the cure they need?
Oh my goodness. It's magnesium glycinate, and it also has vitamin D and ashwagandha and L-theanine. Do I know what those things do? No. Do I know how much of each of those ingredients is actually in the powder? Because this is not regulated by the FDA in the US.
Right.
And so, supplements can just kind of say whatever. But yeah, I mix a couple spoonfuls of it into my water before I go to bed. And it, maybe it's a placebo effect. Maybe it actually works, but I do kind of helps me relax before it's time to go to bed.
Okay, well, when we're discussing things that are not regulated by the FDA, as you mentioned, and things that, are driven an awful lot by feelings of anxiety or worry, and not necessarily diagnosed by a doctor, but self-diagnosed, I guess my question is, where is the line then between placebo and effective medication? There's no control groups for any of this.
No, totally. And I mean, something that I think about a lot is that if you have a positive experience because of a placebo effect, positive experience. And so, I think, there's a way you can look at it and say, oh, it's not that bad for somebody to experiment with supplements, especially if they're in conversation with a healthcare provider about it. Where you start to run into concern, this is into, vaccine denial, or, ingesting essential oils to cure cancer, all kinds of medical misinformation that is very rampant in this country and can actually be dangerous and hurt people.
It's a thin line between a magnesium supplement and ivermectin.
Yeah.
In terms of that, though, maybe you can explain a little bit more, and you can share some of your own story if you want, or just in general. What happens to drive people like yourself, other women, marginalized people, away from, again, this is something you had a hormone imbalance, you should discuss with your doctor, probably, but lots of people aren't doing that.
Yes. Well, I can speak from my personal experience. I have always had incredibly painful periods, to the point of debilitating, cannot work for several days of each month. And I've been to several doctors. I went to the ER last summer with pain that was so bad that I was crying. And I was told to consider taking Advil and Tylenol time instead of one or the other.
Okay.
As if I was not doing that before. So, I had gotten to a point where I was 32. I have had my period since I was 11. So that's 21 years of pain. And that's also of healthcare providers dismissing my pain and telling me that the pain that I was feeling was normal and that it was just what it's like to be a woman. And it got really, really frustrating because I knew that something wasn't right. I knew that I wasn't feeling the type of pain standard for regular, monthly cramps. And so when I finally see that experience reflected in somebody else, when somebody else finally validates, hey, I feel that too, and it sucks, and it's not normal, and this was one thing I did. That's huge. That is so enticing, even to somebody like me who is skeptical of misinformation generally and health misinformation specifically.
When it comes to hormones specific, another, I guess, relatively recent, though gradual phenomenon that makes this more impenetrable to a lot of women in their 30s, which is people are having children later. Can you explain what we know about the relationship, I guess, between childbirth and hormones and
Yeah, pregnancy and childbirth are huge hormonal physical events in a person's life. Your body is flooded with hormones when you're pregnant and all through giving birth and postpartum. And, we don't have a ton about this, but there is evidence that suggests that a myriad number of cancers and other diseases and conditions are less likely to occur in somebody who has given birth. I have my own suspicions as somebody who took exactly in college.
Right.
I will not share them because I don't want to,
Because there's enough misinformation on the internet.
Yeah. But, when I want to talk, I wanted to talk to my mom about the menstrual pain that I was feeling. And, in a certain sense, she could talk about the things that we had in common. But she had me when she was 22. And so her entire adult life has been post going through this major physical event. And I started working on this actually after I had a conversation with my mother-in-law who didn't until she was in her 40s. And she's the only woman in my family who has waited that long. And we were able to talk about endometriosis and the pain that she experienced all through her 30s. And it was really validating and, really interesting.
Whether or not we're talking specific medical science, which again, to be clear, neither of us are qualified to do that.
Yeah.
But one thing that's becoming really interesting to me in this kind of anecdotal discussion is that the big picture here seems to be that this is a huge vacuum for healthcare professionals, for actual medical expertise. If there is a huge category of women in their 30s experiencing this kind of pain, and enough of them clearly experiencing it to drive a whole little sector of the wellness industry.
Yeah. Don't get me started talking about women's pain and how it is minimized in the culture. You would think that there would be more research into all features of, female reproductive health and science. But we're still a little bit in the Bronze Age when it comes to a lot of knowledge about women's bodies.
But what fascinates me is what fills that vacuum, right? When, to your point, nobody in the actual medical system is validating your experience, but you can go on dozens, hundreds of women describing very similar things. And you mentioned the magnesium supplement, but out there, how many different types of, again, I'll use the air quotes, quote unquote, treatments are there for this kind of medical problem that aren't supplied through official diagnoses?
Oh my gosh, so many. I can just right off the top of my head list ones that I have tried myself, which is castor oil packing, where you smear your entire abdomen with castor oil and then wrap a piece of cloth around it so that it can soak into your body. Does it work? I don't know. I do it sometimes still. There are suppositories that you can take that are made of THC and CBD. There's, topical balms made of THC. Like there's all kinds of stuff that you can do. Raspberry leaf tea is another recommended cure, or at least, something to help. Yeah, I'm sure that there are so many more that I don't know about.
What is the solution here? And obviously nobody is going to, unfortunately, change, centuries of medical ignorance of reproductive pain overnight. But what would you say to someone who is listening to this right now and has also found themselves, staring in recognition on TikTok at symptoms, whether they're similar to yours or other people's, and, open willing to smear castor oil all over their abdomen or whatever?
Oh my gosh. I have so much empathy and sympathy for anybody who's going through this. Because, of course, it's not just cis women who experience this kind of erasure in the medical setting. Really high rates of being, dismissed for the pain that they experience. Fat people, they're often told by doctors they need to lose weight before any of their other concerns are even considered. I want to be careful, because I know how easy it is to be enamored by these things and to believe that, oh, maybe this one supplement will help. Maybe this one thing will help. And in order to get the kind of care that could actually help, the type of care where you feel heard, it takes a lot of work. And in the absence of those things, if you don't have access to those things, I would just be very, very careful about the things that you buy into. Try and find literature yourself. Try and read, reports, studies that's actually going on, and make sure to verify the things you're reading. Basic media literacy, check the source, check the outlet that's publishing the story that you're reading. Don't go for some weird aggregated SEO nonsense website that's just trying to get you to click.
10 things cure your period pain.
Yes.
Like that?
Yes. The one secret doctors don't want you to know.
Right. In those little taboola ads at the bottom of an article you're reading.
Yes.
Listen, last question, because you've been through this yourself and you've done so much research and looking into the prevalence of this stuff. Once you realize how many women and marginalized folks are out there diagnosing complex physiology through TikTok videos, what's your takeaway from your own journey? Sure, but also the fact that you are so not alone in it.
It's, my takeaway is pretty. It feels like there is something deeply, deeply broken in our society right now. And it's the collision of misinformation spreading rampantly, a lack of basic media literacy, and also a lack of compassionate preventative health care. And this is what happens. All of those things come together, and it's a huge bummer. It sucks.
Alex, thank you for explaining not only why it sucks, but how it came to suck. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Alex Sujong Laughlin of Defector Media and Normal Gossip, wherever you get your podcasts. That was The Big Story. For more from us, head to thebigstorypodcast.ca. You can find all of our episodes there. You can search for whatever you like. There's a little bar at the bottom. There are hundreds and hundreds for you to choose from. You can send us feedback on what some of the next 100 should be. To us with story ideas at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca or calling us at 416-935-5935 and leaving a voicemail. The Big Story is in every single podcast player and on your smart speakers. Ask them to play The Big Story Podcast. Joe Fish is the lead producer of Robin Simon is also a producer here. Stephanie Phillips is our showrunner, our sound designer. New to the team is Matt Kesselman. Mary Jubrin is our audience development lead. Diana Kay is our manager of business development. I'm your host and your executive producer, Jordan Heath Rawlings, and together for the Frequency Podcast Network, of Rogers. We'll have a little treat for you in the feed as usual on Sunday. It's a fun episode from a couple years back, and we'll be back with a fresh big story on Monday, and we'll talk then.